The movie Argylle came out, and it was a super fun movie, really over the top. It does a great job of parodying like the 90s action style movies and the Mission Impossible James Bond type movies. Overall, it was a ton of fun, which is nice just to see a very fun movie, pretty straightforward, and it had a good concept. The concept, if you haven't seen the trailer, is that Bryce Dallas Howard plays Ellie Conway, and she's a fiction writer who writes spy thrillers. Her spy thrillers turn out to be accurate to the real world to the point where the agencies in the books are after her because they think that she's got insight into the events. She is the main character. You'll see Henry Cavill quite a bit in the trailer, and he's in it some, but he's definitely a secondary character. It's mainly Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell. John Cena's in it a little bit. He's funny. Bryan Cranston is in it. Obviously, he's always good. Catherine O'Hara is in it. She's the mom in Schitt's Creek. She's good. And there's a couple other people that if you don't know they're in it, I'm not going to mention because they just kind of pop in. Overall, it was a really fun movie. The biggest issues for me are one, it was definitely too long. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, you've got an action spy type movie. Usually when you're looking at Mission Impossible, James Bond, those type of movies, you're looking at 2 hours-ish, maybe a little bit over. And those are serious movies. So for this to be mainly an action comedy parody and to be 2 hours and 20 minutes was way too much. It easily could have been half an hour shorter if they had cut down some scenes, which I thought was pretty self-indulgent. And especially at the end, they have a kind of Lord of the Rings thing where it's like, oh, this is the climax. Oh, this is the climax. Oh, this is the climax. Except this isn't Lord of the Rings. It's a fun spy spoof type movie. And the other issue that I had, and this is something I don't like to bring up, but it's actually relevant to the plot, it's that Bryce Dallas Howard is really out of shape. And to me, when you're talking about a movie that cost something in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 million dollars, there's claims that it's 200, but the director says there's no way it was that much, and Apple just bought it for that much. And Bryce Dallas Howard herself got paid $2 million for it. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, hey, get in shape. If someone paid me $2 million to lose weight, I would say okay. Not a huge deal, but it definitely is distracting at certain points in the movie with what's going on. As for the movie itself, Henry Cavill is Argylle. So you get to see him and John Cena working together. They're doing all the spy things where he's got the crazy hair and the cheesy one-liners. And they kind of cut and he just escapes a really bad situation. They really nail all the tropes. There's multiple betrayals and twists and turns and oh, this person isn't who I thought they were. You get all kinds of that stuff. And one of the funnier bits throughout the movie is that she's a cat lady. Like she's an author who doesn't date and she has her cat. And that's established right away. And they actually use the cat for some pretty funny bits throughout the movie, which is nice. It's not just there to be there and cute. And they have some good setups and payoffs, but I really think out of the last hour of the movie, they easily could have cut everything down by half to get it down to about the 2 hour mark, maybe a little bit less even. And the movie would have been so much better for it. It's definitely a complaint that I could see people having is like, oh, it's just not going to end. It keeps going. And the climax is because there's like 3 or 4 of them. Each one takes like 10 to 15 minutes. And they all could have been like 5. And you could have really cut it down. The humor is really good, though. They really nail the whole Mission Impossible vibe. It's kind of hard to critique the plot too much because it's so over the top and outrageous that the movie really leans into what it is. And there's obviously issues and just dumb stuff that happens, but the movie wants it to be that way. So it's kind of hard to say it's bad or wrong or inconsistent or whatever when everything about the movie is over the top. They had some editing in this movie that was awesome. It kind of sucks for this movie that it came out right after all the award shows are about to wrap up because I think this one could definitely win for best editing. There's a really cool scene early in the movie. Obviously, the premise is that her book and the real world are overlapping. And there's this fight going on in front of her. And she keeps seeing the guy fighting. And it keeps flashing back and forth between the person fighting and Henry Cavill. But it's doing edits like in the middle of the moves in the action. So it's pretty neat the way that it's done. There's some really cool stuff in there. And they do a really good job of, oh, there's this code that's really hard to crack, and we need to find this specific thing that leads to this thing. And all that stuff is really well done, and it's very fun. I think they definitely could have cut down on it and made the movie more palatable for a regular audience. Like when you think of a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, I know that's becoming the norm now, but you have to remember, movies like the original Star Wars trilogy were 2 hours on the dot. Movies like Jaws are like 2 hours on the dot. Comedies, it used to be, you were looking at an hour and a half, maybe hour and 45 minutes if it was a little bit longer. So when you talk about a movie that's an action and a comedy, there's really no reason for it to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. And this is kind of a broader thing going on with Hollywood right now where they don't seem to know how to cut the movies down. I don't want to spoil anything, but I like the way that some of the early stuff gets paid off later as the movie progresses throughout the story. I know that's super vague, but it does a good job referencing plot points from throughout the movie at the end of the movie. It just seems like they could have gone without one or cut them all down, and it would have been just as satisfying. It's interesting. I always save the culture war type shit for last because that's the stuff I like to talk about the least, honestly. There wasn't really any of that in this movie. Maybe a couple little things if you're really plugged in. Nothing that's a big deal or would take you out of the movie, I don't think. But something I find fascinating is that Argylle was really fun and really straightforward. There was no political shit. It really just embraced itself for what it was, just over the top action and a parody. And it's so funny that I say that and the critics are just shitting all over it. It has a 37 right now on Rotten Tomatoes, which I hate Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's useless, generally speaking. But it is interesting just to see where the critics are landing. And if you Google Argylle reviews, every review is calling it hollow and just a piece of shit, which is hilarious. Because outside of Godzilla Minus One, this is the first movie that I enjoyed at the theater in a while. I thought Oppenheimer was okay. No intention to watch it again. I didn't bother with the Marvels and that shit. Aquaman 2. So it is funny to see the critics dumping all over it after how much I enjoyed it. But I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to ramble. Since I'm not doing spoilers, I don't want to get too much into the plot because when you have these spy thriller movies, obviously there's a million twists and turns. So it's kind of hard to say anything without spoiling things. But Sam Rockwell and Bryce Dallas Howard were both really good. Obviously Henry Cavill and John Cena were good. Just a fun movie overall. All right. If you saw it, let me know what you think and I'll respond as long as you're not just insulting me. And if you haven't seen it, but you go see it, let me know what you thought. And like and subscribe and shit. Thanks. See ya.